Hi, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 4.3 demo for the piece I call Tights Tube Jacket. Now, if you were following along on Instagram, you saw that I put up these three options for what this character was going to be wearing, and C is the one that ended up winning, as you can see here. And then we take it to this render right here. But then before any of that, we have to go back to May of 2018, which is when I did this sketch right here, and we'll just quickly watch that play through. Usual stuff, fat pencil, and the canvas is 12 inches by 8 inches, 300 dpi, and basically this was me just wanting to do something fun and shape-driven and kind of light. I didn't really know where this was going to go. I just knew that I wanted like certain proportions and certain shapes, and I was just kind of playing around with that. The thing is, after I completed this sketch, I abandoned it, as you saw, or as I said, for like over a year. I did it in May 2018, put it into my gonna do later bin, and didn't do it later until just a couple of months ago. So the sketch that we got out of that was this right here, and now let's take it the rest of the way. I said in my last video that we were done with the Procreate files that dropped the recording, and that was actually a lie, it turns out. The entire flatting process got lost, but the good news is the flatting process is usually the most boring part, and since we've already seen that part of the process like a million times, or at least like 5 or 20 or whatever times, we don't need to see it again. What you see here is the flats, and then I'm trying out different shadow colors to see which one I'm going to like the most. Those little swatches over to the right are me just putting them down. Since the background's white, I can set the layer to multiply and not have to change the layer back to normal in order to see my real color. Since it's on white, it's just the true color, so I can just sample right from there, which makes the whole process a lot quicker. Now, you don't always have a white background, but when you do, it's a nice little way to do your color picking quicker if you need to change out of that color in order to maybe tweak your flats, or you go to a different piece, or you didn't save it in your actual swatches, whatever it is. So we're at the stage right now where I'm doing my ambient occlusion pass. I'm doing select paint, select clear. If you'd like to know more details on select paint, select clear, it is in the description below. The brush that I'm using for all of this is the turpentine brush, which you find in either the artistic or the paint section. I can't remember, but the point is it is a standard Procreate brush, so just go ahead and find it and try it out for yourself and see if you like it. Right now we're just moving through all these layers. I'm putting down the paint, and then I'm using the same brush as the smudge tool to smudge and soften so that I can get it to look soft on the ambient occlusion pass. I'll be going for more of actually capturing the look and feel of the brush when I do the direct lighting pass. If you'd like to see some of the details on how I am exactly smudging things, the previous video to this one, I actually show that in real time. I kind of show how I do that part, so check that one out. Right now we're just working on the eyes and the face, the hair in the back, and then eventually we'll clear the hair where the bangs are, because that's all on its own layer, and we will start doing the shadows for that. Given the layer stack here, it's roughly hair in the back, then head, and then eyes and features and stuff, and then the bangs, including the sort of like side hair part. You can see there I made an adjustment on her irises. I made them more of like a brown, yellow brown kind of, with keeping the desaturation, and that was just to really make her eyes stand out against the rest of the colors that we have going on in the piece. So this pass is mostly about emphasizing the form with a neutral lighting setup, sort of. If you're looking for the actual definition and sort of like best practices around doing an ambient occlusion shadow pass, Google that and try to find ones that explain it way better than I do. Right now we're just sort of talking about the broad process, but there are people that really go in depth, and I highly recommend checking all those out. I'm sure if you just Google it or search it right here on YouTube, you're going to find what you're looking for. So now we're done with the face and the hair, and we're moving on to the tights, and then we're going to go to the, I believe, the tube top, and then the jacket, and then her right arm, and then the shoes, I think, are at the very, very end. See me testing out the different colors for the shadow there. I did end up tweaking slightly that shadow, and I'm sure some more tweaks will happen as we go. But now I am putting in the actual hard shadow from the direct light source, which is coming from the top right and going to the bottom left in general. You can see here there's a little bit more of an emphasis of the texture and shape of the turpentine brush, but one thing is the shadows are going in here really heavy, and at this point I'm thinking to myself, okay, do I want it to be that high a contrast? What am I really going for here? And you will see that it'll lighten in a second. I'll just flip it lighter. I don't believe, I'm going to say this not being entirely sure, I don't believe I lower the opacity. I think I actually increase the brightness on that particular layer, which is what just happened right there. And now that's what we go with for more of the general shadow of the general direct shadow of the piece. Okay, shadowing the legs, the skin part of the legs, and now we jump back into the hair, face, facial features, bangs combo. I don't really like saying like shadowing. I just realized I said that, but I don't really like shadowing or shading as good art words. I think that they have their meaning, and I don't think that, you know, they're wrong. There's just something really weird. It's like, you know, you get hung up on certain words that bother you, and for some reason whenever I hear shading, it like really bothers me. I think about like being in like middle school and I've got a pencil and I'm like shading my drawing of Spawn I've just done or something like that, trying to get the cross hatching. I don't know, something about it. And now the follow-up is, so what word would you prefer? And I don't have one, but there's just something really weird to me about saying like, oh, how'd you get the shading just right? And like, I don't know, that my brain just locks up when I hear that for some reason. And that was my complaint of the video. Now I'm just throwing in an extra layer for the nostrils, just to make sure those are punchy, and we'll just keep moving through the layers on the shadow. Right now we're on the bang part of the hair, the bangs and the sideburny things. That's all one piece, which I'll show you. I'll do a very brief deep dive on this one since we actually get to see a lot of this painting process. I'll just make it super fast when we get to that. Okay, now we're just finishing up the other part of the hair, like her left, our right side, and then we'll pull back out and we'll get to basically the rest of it, the tights, the jacket, and the tube top. Mention that even though there's a lot of opportunity here to get these harsh shadows from a stylistic point of view, there are certain things that from a more realistic, capturing the form correctly point of view, it doesn't make sense to keep it that harsh. And I think that if she's got these legs that just have these curves and this very round I guess quality to them, and then she's got leggings on, which is just going to make that even more pronounced. If it had these hard shadows, I don't think it would work that well. I mean, if it was like a cartoon, yeah, but in this context, I really wanted to make sure that they were really rounded out and that they felt like they were like this soft curve all the way around, because that would just really sell her shape as well as the vibe of like having the leggings on, basically. That right there, what just flipped by super fast, was me putting a noise layer and everything, because I thought that I wanted to do that, and then I ended up turning it off. Now that we're coming to the end of our two main shadow layers and I have that definition I'm looking for, I can go in and start adding some more of the blush. Now, I had the blush on her nose anyways because I was using that actually as like a graphic shape to say this is where her nose is. But then for like her lips, her fingers, that all, and her ears, that had to all be brought in later once I had the form there to sort of know where everything is. Now we're doing the lighting. Or I should say we're doing the highlight. It's a blue, just sort of very subtle light, and you can see it across her face and hair mostly, and as it goes on, we'll start basically bringing it across the entire image. It has no special layer effects on it, it's just a normal layer with a lowered opacity. You can see in this case too, I'm using this blue light to be the reflection on the eyes, which is just a nice way to do it occasionally when it all is working out. So now we're bringing that lighting into the collar and then the jacket, and we'll just go bonkers with it across everything, making sure that we're hitting the apex of each one of those curves as much as possible so that we can really sell that dimension. And so here we're going to do that little hot edge along the shadow where it hits the skin, so that we can get some of that subsurface scattering vibe going on there. And really the rest of the video, there's a lot of things that go by very quickly. I'm not going to talk through them. We're going to do the hair shine now, but then I'm not going to talk through them. It's going to go hair shine, bounce, and then like a ton of little details. Feel free to watch the video and look at all those little details. After we get to the end of the piece, I'm going to go through the file real fast, and I think a lot of that will be a little clearer and easier to talk through. And now that we've got those outlines and the gradient and all that kind of stuff, we are done. Let's dive into the file to get some details on all of these individual elements. Okay, so here is the Procreate file. Let's go ahead and zoom in so you can see the sort of detail that we're working with here. And by detail, I don't mean the detail of like me pumping a bunch of detail in, but when you see what the brush produces in this roughness, it's actually quite cool. So let's go through this super fast. Let's turn off all the layers that are irrelevant right now. The simplest thing to look at first is the flats, which are just flatted. She has a fairly simple design, so that's cool. And then we've got this outline around here, which is pretty fun. It's a yellow outline and then a second outline that's a black with a lowered opacity. And it's cool because I used to do something like this a lot. Like let's say 10 years or so ago, I would do like almost like a cell shaded look, and then I'd slap like a stroke around it in Photoshop. But that was kind of like a more sterile application, and sort of hand doing it makes it feel kind of cooler and a little more I don't know, just it adds something to it instead of it just being like a computer generated even stroke around the entire thing. So let's go to the basically the dimension layer, or the dimension folder, and I'll go through these really fast. because you guys have seen this a million times at this point. And if you haven't seen me do this a million times, go through the last few videos. But we've got the ambient occlusion right there. You can sort of see how that looks. Then we've got we've got the nostril pass, which is good because you can see that just by adding that, it gives us tons of dimensional information about that, about her nose and the shape of it and everything. Then we've got our direct light shadow, which is nice because it sort of takes on more of those brushy qualities. Then we've got the light layer, and this is just a normal layer with a lowered opacity. Next, we've got that sort of hot transition between the shadow and the light. Then we do the shine in the hair, which is two layers that are the same color with just different opacities. This is obviously a very light opacity. You can see it turn on and off there. And then one that is a little bit more opaque so that we can get a little bit more. When it's at its fullest, they're both that bright blue that we used in the lighting elsewhere. Okay, then we've got this reflection on the eyeballs. And then this is the bounce light layer, which you can see there's bounce on her face, on her hair, underneath her nose, which is a particularly nice one for selling that dimension, and then like on her collar as well. So we've got a lot of good light play to really try and build out some of her dimension. Then we have a pupil reflection, and then the shine in her eyes right there. Lastly, we have this gradient across her entire body, which is like a dark purple that is set to multiply and has its opacity adjusted to taste. And then lastly, the signature layers. So yeah, that's it. It's fairly simple. And now a lot of people have been sort of mad lately when I've said something is simple. I don't mean that it's simple like the whole thing is simple and that like you're an idiot if you can't do this. What I mean is each individual element is simple, and really it's just the simplistic nature of each one of those, and then they get added up to something that's much more complex. So when I say it's simple, I'm not trying to say like, oh, this is a piece of cake. I'm just trying to say that like that's the way I think about it. And especially if you see all the ones that I've done up until now, we're repeating so much of the same techniques that it starts getting easier and easier. So I hope this deep dive was valuable to you. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.